Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I have a fantastic and fascinating guest with me today who also talks about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, which is personal safety. His name is Jason Perry. He is a former Navy SEAL, SWAT officer, executive protection specialist, corporate security expert, podcast host, farmer, dad of 3 children under 5, and pastor who specializes in blending faith and preparedness in safety training. He is the founder of Trident Shield, an emergency preparedness security training and consulting firm in Johnson City, Tennessee, where he masterfully integrates biblical principles with practical safety training. Jason's approach to active shooter and workplace violence prevention is as well as emergency preparedness and personal safety, is deeply rooted in real-world experience and guided by his faith. Jason, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
It's my honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And once again, I just want to say thank you for your service.
It was my honor.
Well, how did you go? Because I read, your entire bio, and you actually went from being a devout atheist to a devout Christian. And so what triggered that transformation?
Well, it's a 40-year transformation and it's still undergoing.
Mm.
My conversion story actually begins with my grandfather. My grandfather was an orphan in Newfoundland, and he went to a notorious orphanage called St. Vincent's. There's actually a movie about the boys of St. Vincent's, and that's where Catholic priests abuse sexually and physically kids, and that put him on a very dark path. Dark path meaning he was very anti-religious. We were raised atheist. God was not a part of it. I was educated in the secular Northeast, where if you're not getting that at home, you're not getting it anywhere, right? Like, I was never even presented the case for creationism. It was, we all evolved from bacteria, period. And if you believe anything else, you believe in the Easter Bunny, right? Or leprechauns. Okay. So that started me down a very dark path. My whole family was atheist. I was the first to break that curse, and it led to multiple drug overdose deaths, very dark, miserable existence. And so, I, struggled. I grew up in city in Boston, and exposed to violence at an early age. And for me, we didn't have a lot of money. So the only way I could achieve any status was being a tough guy, right? You could either be the toughest kid in the school or a fighter, or you could be the best dressed, or, whatever. And so that was my venue. So I started off that path. At about 16, I, I was also dyslexic and a bunch of other things that really hindered me for a while. But at 16, I was big working out with older guys. I got a job bouncing in a bar. And at 16, I lied about my age, hooked up with my first older woman. I'm like, why am I going to school anymore? Like, why am I? So I dropped out of high school at 10th grade, 2 months into 10th grade, and never looked back. Became a thug. And at 20, I remember lying in bed. I paid a lot of money to feel terrible, with drugs and everything else. I'm staring at a ceiling fan at 10 in the morning. And I'm like, I can't believe I paid to feel this way. Like, this is awful. And I'm like, but I didn't really believe in anything. I didn't have a God at that time. But what I did believe is I believed in America at that time. I was raised in Boston, where the Freedom Trail's right there. There's Paul Revere's house. There's Bunker Hill, the U.S.'s Constitution. Like, history was very real to me. And I always believed in that. And I always wanted to be something, but I got sidetracked because, when you're raised without God and you acquire these abandonment wounds, and the abandonment wounds are, my mom had me when she was 16, my dad was 18. That didn't last very long. Dad went away. Mom gave him to grandparents because she was still a kid herself. So you acquire wounds. You put your first faith, you put your faith in your first girlfriend. That doesn't work out. So you become wounded, and then you go from this wounded to the serial wounder, right? So now I'm a liar and I'm a cheat. I'm all these things, and I'm never going to let anyone in my heart again, right? So this whole time, here I am, I'm 20. I'm like, I'm going to serve my country, So I, to make a extremely long story short, I eventually enlisted in the Navy to become a Navy SEAL. I figured those guys will never abandon me, right? Those guys will be there to with me to the death in the camaraderie. So we're all born empty vessels, right? And we're either God's going to fill us or the world's going to fill us, right? So I was trying to fill this in the beginning with partying and with women. And then I tried to fill it with camaraderie, right? But, the SEAL teams were awesome. And I went and became a SEAL and did 16 years and all that.
Wow.
But, again, all men betray. We're all broken, right? We're all broken. So, did anyone leave me behind in a rice paddy like platoon? No, right? But there's still, you can't put your faith in people, right? You put your faith. I've learned to put my faith in God, and He never betrays, right? So, but it took me a while to get there. So during that time, I was on my last deployment. I lost my little brother to heroin. I
Oh.
went to his funeral, and none of his friends were there. I cornered somebody who was there and said, "Where is so and so, so and so, so and so?" So they're dead, already lost to heroin. So I'm like, okay, I am tired of going to third world countries where I'm making people who hate me safe. Okay. They're always going to hate me. There's nothing I can do about that. But I'm burning my life and my family and everything else doing that. I'm going to come home. I'm going to make my hometown safe. So I leave. I walk away at 16 years. Nobody walks away at 16 years. Like, you don't get any retirement. You get nothing. Right.
Wow.
And it was always about the mission for me. Nothing was about money. It was always about the mission for me. So I became a Boston cop, and made my way onto the SWAT team rapidly, obviously, given my background. And it was a great job, you know. But then my son, because I actually have 4 kids. My father kid is from a previous marriage, and he has autism. And you know, my son was born with autism, and autism is one of those things where the more you throw at it at the front, the more better, better life they have later. So when you're on the SWAT team, you don't have a life. You're either doing, warrants or raids or, escorts. We were also the motorcycle team. So we were escorting every Democrat president loves going to Boston, and they all get the motorcades and then the concerts and, and the sports teams and all that stuff. So we moved to Charlottesville, Virginia. In Charlottesville, Virginia, that's where we had family and friends, and the Virginia Institute of Autism was there. So we went there. I started bodyguarding a guy worth $52 billion. He would fly me in for 30 days with a team and fly me out 30 days with a team. But that's still 180 days away from your family.
Right.
But again, I got to see what security looked like when money was not a problem. Right. So did that until Sandy Hook happened. So December of 2012, Sandy Hook happened. An autistic kid walked in and killed a bunch of first and second graders. And I said, I love my job. I love the family that was taking care of me, that I was guarding, and they treated me very well. But they can afford 1,000 of me, right? No problem. They're not going to miss me one bit. So I'm going to try to help families. So I started Trident Shield during that, and we've been in business since then. So that's my security training company that we deal with that. But my faith part, if I could back up just a tad, I just wanted to get to that part through that part. Before I got out, so right before about a year and a half, about 2 years before I got out, I had a cancer scare. I was in Iraq, and they thought I was dying of cancer. They wanted to send me home. I passed a kidney stone the day I landed on my birthday in Iraq. And then they did some stuff and found all these different masses. And they're like, "Hey, we're going to send you home. We think you have cancer." I'm like, "I'm going to finish my deployment. I'll deal with it after that." So finish my deployment. And now they're like, "Hey, I got back in October. They're like, get your stuff in order. We're not sure how long you're going to be around." So I'm like, woof. So they sent me to shore duty, right? So here in shore duty, I go to Panama City, Florida, where I serve as an instructor down there. It's great tour duty. They treated me very well, gave me everything I needed. I got no problems with them. But I thought I was dying of cancer. And I was one of those guys who were like, "Hey, I'm not going to go out a 98-pound shriveled husk of a person. I'm going to party like a rock star." So I went to Panama City, Florida, party like a rock star. And then Oh, we made a mistake. You're not dying. Okay, great. Um, you have something where you grow masses that turn into nothing. So don't worry about it. So I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And this, of course, was when, I was working through what I was going to do with my brother and everything else. So my point is right before I got out, my marriage was completely burned in at this point. Um, we were going to go our separate ways. A book made its way into my life called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And it was the first time legitimately in my life where somebody presented the scientific case for creationism, right? That, hey, we're not an accident, we're not random chaos. The specificity of our universe, shows a designer. I saw
Mm-hmm.
DNA for the first time and I'm like, this is code. And if there's a code, there's a coder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that started me down a very different path. So I went from that to, wait a minute, all right, there's a creator, right? So the first third of that book gives a scientific case for creationism. So I go from atheist to agnostic in the first third of the book. The last 2/3 of the book of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist is the scientific case for Christ, that he lived, that he died, that the Bible is accurate, and how they cross-reference it with everything. And I'm like, well, they've been right about this, so let me do that. But I'm still unchanged heart-wise. I'm still a liar. I'm still a cheat. I'm still that broken person with that abandonment wound who's pushing everyone away because they're only gonna leave me anyways. Right. And I didn't understand this at that point. This comes later, but this is where I'm at. Now, God also in my life put what I call breadcrumbs leading me home.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout my life at different points, I came across people who had peace, supreme peace. Like all my SEAL buddies, the guys who are the most blood soaked, they're all completely broken unless they're Christians. They're all in bars drinking themselves in their stupor. They're all, raging, broken people trying to fill this hole, except for the Christians who weren't in the bars, who weren't chasing girls, who had this peace. And he put them in my life at certain points to touch so I could recognize what that was. So now I'm a Christian. A Christian light is what I would call, or carnal Christian. So I believe at this point that God created everything, and I need to clean my slate before I die. So hopefully I don't get brain shot on a raid, where I don't get to. Hopefully it's like a gut shot. I get time to repent for everything I do. Right. So autism comes, crushes my Christian baby legs. Right, destroys my. We decided to give it one more go, and the ex wanted to have a kid, thought that would fix it. We get autism. Autism absolutely crushed me, crushed my relationship with God at that time. I'm a great communicator, and here's a kid who's nonverbal. I can't communicate with. It was my kryptonite, right? So that destroyed our marriage, and but during that time, I, after we separated, I found my wife, my future wife, Lauren, and during that time, someone brought me or said, Jay, you need to go to ORW. And I'm like, ORW, what's ORW? Well, it's in Lake Tahoe. Well, for once, it was going to be in Lake Tahoe. When I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God a couple things. Why Abraham? Why Jacob? And why on earth didn't you choose Lake Tahoe for your holy city? Because it's the most beautiful place on earth. If Jerusalem's not so pretty, if you ever, they're like, I don't find it attractive at all. Right. And so anyways, but they eventually, to make a longer story shorter, I go there, I truly get saved. I identify my abandonment wound. I get healed. I went from a guy who never wanted kids to now I want to have kids, right? That's the natural state of a healthy, healed person is you want more of your wife and your kids. You want more of you and your kids. You want more that's go forth and fill the earth. That's just the way we're wired when you're healed, right? When you're not healed, you find value in other different things. And, and what happens at 50, everyone hits their brick wall, no matter how independent and how strong they are, they have nothing to pass on. Right. And you see this with a lot of people now as they're talking about it with feminism, they feel betrayed in it because, now they've got no family, they've got nothing, and so on and so forth. But anyways, that's how I got saved. And from that moment on, I've done nothing but try to serve God. Right. I became a pastor. I still do, what pays the bills is Trident Shield. And that was a really long-winded answer to one question, and I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It was wonderful. But I do want to go back to, as a
Sure.
medical person, I mean, I've had
Sure.
40 years experience in two different medical fields, combined. Um, when they diagnosed you with cancer and told you, hey, this is it, you're going to die, did they do a biopsy, or were they just kind
So
of,
they started to, right? So this is what happened. So they found, when my kidney stone, they had to go in and get my kidney stones in Iraq. Um, And when they did that, they found a mass of my adrenal gland. And then they found a mass on my kidney. Now, both of those they don't do biopsies on because they're too
mm,
contagious if they do that. So they
okay.
monitor them. And if they do that, they just pull it and then they analyze it after that. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
So and then they found a mass on my lung. So now they're like, okay, you've got all these things here. We're kind of worried. So again, when I got back, they pulled, a few months, or a bit after, they pulled my right adrenal gland, and it was no cancer. All right. So then I had something on my thyroid. They biopsied that, no cancer.
Mm,
So they had all these things, and they're like, okay, looks like you're not dying. Looks like you just grow these things for whatever reason. And so again, so again, and I appreciate your medical profession. I was what was called an IDC in the military, an independent duty corpsman. So that's like a PA. Like
mm,
that was my secondary specialty, shooter first, medicine second. So
mhm. Now, some people might find that quite the paradox.
no, not at
Shooter
all,
first,
because yeah.
paramedic,
Well, the best medicine in combat is bullets, is
mhm,
stopping people from hurting your people, right?
mhm,
It's just like the best self defense is not getting hurt, right?
mhm,
Or getting raped or getting killed, right? It's
mhm,
preventing that from happening. And then you address the secondary issue. So when a battle's going on, you stop the bad guys and then you treat the wounded, right?
mhm,
So that is, it makes you better because you understand anatomy and physiology better. The
mhm,
things that I use most are my medical training every day,
mhm.
right? Because I mean, you're basically a body mechanic, right?
Pretty
Your body's a
much.
machine. You become a body mechanic, and you're constantly helping people solve their mechanical problems in their body.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. And all of this really applies to my martial arts training too. The
Sure,
medical background has been a godsend because I know,
sure.
what targets to hit, what not to hit. It really is, medicine is
It,
fascinating. Physiology, anatomy is just absolutely fascinating.
it really works well when you're dealing with weapons or improvised weapons,
Mhm,
because for example, like when I'm doing my improvised weapon class, a box cutter is very different from an ice pick, right? A
mhm,
box cutter, you could get on my back and you could stab me with a back box cutter 100 times and it would not kill me. There's
mhm,
nothing back there. I have too much armor, we'll call,
mhm,
right? But an ice pick could be very different. But on my back, there's not a lot there, right? You'd have to move up into the brainstem, right?
mhm,
That's basically the only place there that you're going to find anything to do anything. So again, understanding weapon systems
mhm,
and how to use them based upon anatomy and what you're able to do with those comes into where in the active shooter training do, or the self-defense training I do, which is all realist based stuff. It's not complex. I've dabbled in martial arts myself. I dabbled in taekwondo for years, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, boxing for decades.
mhm,
And all those are really, every one of them are really good to some extent. um, but again, what I find to take the a lay person is it has to be simple, instinctive techniques that
mhm,
people see once and can do. If it's a
mhm,
22-part system like Krav Maga or some of these
mhm,
other things, they really break down because they all break down because as soon as you grab something, what is somebody doing a self-defense? Pull back and break
mhm,
the grab. Now they're not going to go do your ballet that you're trying to do with them, right?
mhm.
So their ballet dance that they're supposed to do. So, anyways, again, I don't know if I went off topic there or whatever, but
No, but I do appreciate the fact that you said ballet dance. Did you know I was a dancer?
no, I did not.
Yep,
But that would make
over 40,
sense.
over 45 years of ballet training. I still train.
Well, footwork is everything, so that's got to help
Ye
you a lot.
Yes, it is. On the other hand, though, it really made me, it was at a disadvantage at when I first started training in my martial art because my center of gravity, I knew where it was, but it was always so high from all of those years of extending and being
Yeah,
light.
yeah, yeah.
And the guys would walk
Bent
by
over.
me
Yeah.
and just the wind from them walking by me would knock me over because I was just, my center of gravity was so high, but it was wonderful. It was just, a nice, again, dichotomy of, the martial arts and the ballet. I want to go back to the weapons because when you're talking
Sure.
weapons, I'm just thinking that maybe some of the listeners, when they hear weapons, like their ears just like, oh, because we have a saying in our art, or my sensei would always say that everything is a weapon. But once you get comfortable with understanding weapons and, like you said, anatomy, you're way above the pay grade of the average person of knowing how to protect yourself. So can you go into a little bit more detail about that?
On which part of why weapons are necessary, or on why knowing anatomy is necessary?
Well, a little bit of both, because I think, for example, I don't like snakes. Okay. And my
Right.
reaction when I see a snake, I just freak to high heaven. So
Right.
one time in the dojo, and I used to feel the same way about firearms, which
Hmm.
is really bizarre because when I was growing up, my dad had a beautiful, a cabinet that he built with his
Hmm.
guns, his rifles and stuff in it. And it
Sure.
just never fazed me. But one day in the dojo, Sensei pulled out a fake gun.
Hmm.
And, so we were gonna work with, gun disarmament, and I mean, I kind of freaked out. It was like the same reaction that I would have if you would see a snake,
Sure.
or if I would see a snake. So now after working with it a little bit more, I'm very comfortable with just knowing what it is. It's not the gun, it's the person behind it. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. So with the way, when I do active shooter training, sometimes I have to go to places that are very gun averse. So like Berkeley, California. Okay,
Mm,
is very different than El Paso, Texas. Right. And once I teach how firearms work. They are a printer that prints lead at a high rate of speed.
mhm,
Right. That's basically all they are. They are a machine that works in a very specific manner. And I teach them how to cause a malfunction in that. Right. Every
mm,
person here has dealt with a clogged printer. Well, if you can clog a printer, you can clog a firearm. And that's what I do with that. Weapon systems, right? The odds of the average person or even an extraordinary person beating up a 6'7", 300-pound attacker, right? Um, particularly if let's say they're a grandma, let's say they're 90 years old, bad back, bad hip, bad everything. She would be a victim at any time in history until the invention of the firearm. The firearm is the great equalizer. The firearm makes everyone powerful and makes everyone capable of defending themselves. And that is why firearms are so necessary, because there are bad people. There are really, really bad people. And people get victimized every year. And the stats out there are not even close when you break down the math. There's,
mhm,
Colin Noir of the NRA really does a great job of breaking down how many lives guns save versus how many
mhm,
lives gun take, and it's not even close. It's just in self defense or aversion. Like we'll never know how many people didn't do something because they saw somebody with a gun,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Somebody goes into a store in the South and everyone's open carrying and they're like, I'm not doing that here, right?
Right.
So again, what you're talking about also, and one of the things to overcome the fear of snakes, the fear of violence, the fear of an attacker, the fear of firearms, the stress inoculation. So stress inoculation is something that I do on my Twitter page all the time. I
Mhm,
show attacks going down. I show brutal attacks all the time. And people are
mhm,
like, oh, your cause is showing division. You're showing this. I'm like, no, I'm helping you overcome what's called normalcy bias. For people who are blessed and who've never been hurt in their life, right? When I do a self defense class for women, I have two types of women: people who've been attacked and people who have never been attacked. The
mhm,
person who's been attacked before treats everyone like they're a threat until they prove they're not. The person who's never been attacked before treats everyone, like they're not a threat until it's too
mhm,
late. Right.
mhm, mhm,
So with stress inoculation, you're seeing things, your brain is registering things. You're doing small bite-sized doses of what scares you most. And it
mhm,
helps your brain, your mind connect dots sooner than someone who's never seen that before,
mhm,
right? Like an active shooter, very few people have been involved in an active shooter. But if you've seen a bunch of those go down on film or in movies or in different situations, your brain is going to connect this. Oh, this is what I saw. And then training kicks in. Right now, I need to do this. I need to get behind cover. I need to figure out distance to the threat and the type of weapon system. Right. Is it downstairs in the parking lot and I'm on the 7th floor of a building? I've got plenty of time to make decisions. Or is it right out in the hall? Right. Those are all very different things. Knowledge is always empowering. Right. And knowledge is always empowering. And then it's about achieving a baseline understanding of weapon systems and how, like you said, your sensei said, anything can be a weapon, right? So, I often do corporate America, that employee of the year trophy that's been on your desk forever, is a great bludgeoning weapon. But guess what? You have to know how to use bludgeoning weapons, right? If you hit me in the bicep with a bludgeoning weapon, I'm going to say, ouch, and you just lost your chance. So you have to understand how the weapon systems work, right? Where your proper targeting is. And like with blunt, it is proper targeting and power. Can you transfer power through a bludgeoning weapon appropriately to cause a concussion or fracture, right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about blunt trauma, right? So in blunt trauma, I've got a lot of, when I do my women's self-defense classes, a lot of times I'll have a lot of anti-gun people show up depending on where I'm doing them. And they all have a Louisville Slugger by their door. And they think they're going to turn into Babe Ruth with that Louisville Slugger overnight. And 8 out of 10 of them can't transfer power. Well, like I say, here's a heavy bag. Here's an attacker. Let's assume you've got enough room to swing it and show me what you're going to do. And I'm like, I'm like, that is not your weapon system. Right now, there are some girls who played softball who haunt my dreams with the violence they unleashed into those dummies if they have enough room to do it, right? Because think of hallways, right? There's not room in hallways. Think about all this stuff, right? So that could be a weapon system for them. Now, the other women have to either go to a stabbing weapon system or a firearm type weapon system because they don't have enough power to transfer. And the same thing is with physical stuff, right? When we're talking about elbows, when we're talking about palm strikes, we're talking about punching is really hard to do without hurting your hand. Like Mike Tyson has broke his hand in every street fight he's ever been in as an adult. Jeez. Why? Because he transfers so much power. He's used to hitting with so much power. All of a sudden he doesn't have a glove anymore. Right? And that tape on his wrist, right? One bend in your wrist, you just broke your wrist. Right? You hit with these bottom two, you break these two. You hit an angle, you shear a knuckle. Now you get a floating knuckle, right? So again, but that requires a ton of power to do that, right? So a lot of self-defense systems really lack that integrity to say, hey, listen, you can't transfer enough power to cause a concussion in person. So you need to go eyes. You need to go throat, right? Here takes minimal, like just that in the throat, and their eyes are going to wake up and they're going to have a little bit of swelling, a little bit more. And now they're going to need a surgical airway, right? So again, teaching everyone how to understand their weapon systems, what a realistic assessment of their capabilities, right? Do they see themselves as Mike Tyson when they're really not? Right. And that's what we have to go through. And then saying, okay, here's my realistic capabilities. Now I need a weapon system that allow me to defend my life. And that's when firearms come in. Right. That's when, somebody can't because of the laws. That's where an edged weapon system comes in. That's where, chemical and everything else, which are all other steps. But
I love that you were addressing the transfer of power. And especially the women with the baseball bat, because I do know a lot of women who have their baseball bat by the door. And, I just kind of cringe. And it's like, well, if it works for you, but you might want to consider taking some classes or doing some training. But even, when you see a woman, I help train a lot of the people at the dojo, especially the women, the newer ones when they come in, because they're always terrified. And I understand because I was too. But, you see them kind of trying to punch, and all they're doing is they're using their arm and their hand and not the rest of their body. So it's actually a whole body movement.
It is. And I've seen 155-pound boxer kill somebody with a punch. The punch didn't kill the guy. The concrete did when his head hit the concrete.
Yeah, right.
Right. So he knocked him out through speed, violence of aggression, power, placement. Right. And then when the head hit the pavement, the person, got a concussion and died. right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
again, that's because what happened is he hit him, caused that, and now 300 plus pounds falling down, head hitting first. It sounds like a watermelon splashing, right? It's terrible.
Yeah.
So women can do that, but it's not something you learn in a day or an
Yeah.
afternoon. It is like that guy had thrown, he was a professional boxer,
Yeah.
had thrown millions of punches.
Again, thank you for bringing that up because that's one thing about women's self-defense classes that really, really bothers me is that people, women will take one class and think, okay, now I've got some
Yeah.
skills, I know what to do. And nothing can be further from the truth. This is just kind of like an appetizer. This is just an introduction. There is so much more to learn. And if you're not practicing on a regular basis, if you're not taking a series of classes and renewing this skill and polishing it up, you're doing yourself a disservice, ladies.
Yeah. And you have to be functionally fit, right? You
Yes.
have to be, you have to have the correct mobility. You have to have
Mhm,
the correct power, right? There are people out there who look great doing katas and a lot of other things, but can they transfer enough power to cause trauma? And that's why
mhm,
in my self defense classes, I don't get into um, a lot of stuff that a lot of other stuff does. I
mhm,
get into, and if we're trying to avoid a rape situation, all I have to do is cause pain. And if
mhm,
I can cause pain, that's going to take them out of the mood. Right.
mhm,
So
mhm,
eyeballs are my favorite targets in that area. If
mhm,
you ever had your eyeball hurt, there's nothing else you can think of.
mhm,
And it immediately takes away. So trauma to the eye, which is protected by a 1 millimeter flap of skin, which
mhm,
is, your eyelid is where I go. Trauma to the groin is great. Again, to help take them out of the mood for that. That doesn't mean you're not going to get murdered, but it
mhm,
means you won't get raped. Right.
mhm,
So again, tackling the threats as the priority comes and what the intent is, but nothing is as effective in the history of the world as a firearm.
mhm,
There's nothing that's going to save you as much as that if you need to defend your life.
mhm,
Okay. Now, I hope people never have to use one.
mhm,
But you know, 2024 is on target to be one of the most violent, crazy years ever.
mhm,
Okay. Because of the election coming up, we're going to be driven into corners. Black and white are going to hate each
mhm,
other. Now we're going to do immigrant versus resident, right?
mhm,
And then we're going to do straight versus LGBTQ trans. They're driving
mhm,
us and dumping gasoline and napalm on that to make
mhm,
us hate each other. That's how what happens every 4 years,
mhm,
right? And there's going to be a lot of people hurt like there were in
mhm,
2020, right?
mhm,
And so I spend a majority of my time teaching people how to think with situational awareness and a skill called active planning, which is
mhm,
if this, then that. Right.
mhm,
So if I can sit there and say, I'm aware because I'm out of my phone.
mhm. Thank you.
All
Say that
right.
again.
I'm aware because I'm out of my phone.
Okay.
Right. I'm not texting as I'm walking down a major metropolitan street. I mean, how many hundreds of people die,
Mhm,
from walking into traffic, texting, like the
mhm,
most preventable death ever. All right.
mhm,
So anyways, but so I see everything. And if I see everything and I understand situational awareness, and situational awareness has a lot of components to it. It's not just weapon, this, that, the other thing.
mhm,
It's also, I tell people, with situational awareness, you have to profile. And here's the profile. Is this person capable of harming me? And then cross reference that with crime statistics where you're at.
mhm,
Right. So
mhm,
if I'm in a high crime place where there's a lot of crime and the people who commit that crime fit that description, and I'm crossing the street. I don't
mhm,
care who I offend.
mhm,
My goal is for my daughter to make it home. I teach
mhm,
her very plain English that, what to see, what to do, how to do it, and to be able to before it's too late, right? There's preventable violence and then there's unpreventable violence.
mhm,
Okay. Our job is to make sure we avoid all the preventable and
mhm.
then survive the unpreventable.
Okay, I want to go back to that because your
Sure.
daughters are both very young. So I
Yep.
just want to reiterate or to highlight for the listeners that you're teaching your daughter who is how old right now?
She's going to be 5 in May.
Right. So it's never too soon
Never.
to learn how to defend yourself, to learn how to keep yourself safe, to learn the practical tips, self awareness, and to put the phone down.
Yep. My kids won't have phones for a very long time. But the main thing is them seeing things and understanding where risk is. Right. I'm a
Mhm.
professional risk person. That's what I do for
Mhm.
businesses.
Mhm.
So when they walk on my back property, I got 44 acres. The risk
Mhm.
there is a coyote. The risk there
Mhm.
is a mama bear. The
Mhm.
risk there is a rabid animal, right?
Mhm.
And the risk there is some sexual predator who's going to
Mhm.
come around and do that. My 4.5-year-old knows what to do, right?
Mhm.
They typically have radios on them. They have tracking,
Mhm.
GPS tracking on them because, if we do that, we don't let them go alone back there without protective dogs or
Mhm.
people with them.
Mhm.
And everyone on my property is armed,
Mhm.
period. Right.
Mhm.
Because if a bear is coming at you, you're not talking it down.
Right.
Right. I mean, most bears, 99.999% of the time, want nothing to do. But if you missed your cub walk behind you from the bush line when they came out this way and you're between mama bear and that, you may not even know.
Yeah.
Right. And then there are, you know, pit bulls and other dogs. And I don't not saying anything against pit bulls, but wild roving dogs have torn people up, right? And little kids look like great little things for the targets for them. And there's
Mhm.
a lot of videos out there on that. So again, understanding that, never going to the guy who says you want to see a puppy. No,
Mhm.
go get dad
Mhm.
first, and then we'll go see the puppy.
Right. I want to go back to that situational awareness, and tie that into what you were talking about. Here it is, 2024, and of course now we're being separated, isolated, put in different categories and groups, and we all have to hate
Tribes,
each
yeah,
other.
different
Um,
warring tribes.
exactly. So I would imagine that if we all understand this, that this is happening, and it's being done by design to turn us against each other, that there is a way that we can just say, not today, Satan. We're not doing it this time around. We're all
Yeah,
humans. We all want the same things. We all want, to be safe, healthy, loved, take care of our communities, our children, to make it home safely every day. And if we just focus on that, then maybe this won't be the kind of year that we're expecting.
yeah. The problem is that the gatekeepers of knowledge push this narrative all the time. Right, I'm
Right.
going to give you two examples. This isn't me being anything. This is math. Okay,
Mhm.
from the FBI statistics prior to George Floyd. Okay, prior to 2020 and the world burning down, prior to everything we're seeing going on right now. A person who looks like me is 4,240% more likely to be attacked by somebody who doesn't look like me, right? A black person,
Mhm.
than the other way around. But that's not what the
Mhm.
media says. All right. A person that looks like
Mhm.
me is 2,030% more likely to be attacked by a Hispanic person rather than the other way around. But you would think, based upon watching all the other channels, that it was
Mhm.
the other way around, that people like me are going out and attacking everyone. That's just simply not what the math warrants.
Mhm.
That's not what the math. And until we identify with math, with statistics, what is going on out there, who is attacking who and why, we can't, we're not addressing reality. We're addressing fantasy,
Mhm.
right? And if you're going to address fantasy, then you're just wasting your time. So again, we have to go out, but here's the example in situation awareness. If I am walking by a black church that's dumping out, I
Mhm.
100% would walk through that in a second. They're
Mhm.
coming out. It's not the people, it's the culture. If I am
Mhm.
walking through people who are dressed in a very street manner, right? Yeah, and wearing all red, all blue, with their pants down halfway down their pants. I'm not walking by that, right? So again, it's a cultural thing. You inject the Christian aspect in all this, and it all goes away, right?
Mhm.
You inject Christ in any of this, and you don't have that same threat, right? So again, a lot of people don't want to talk about that. I spend a lot of time posting videos based upon the reality that we see today, and I'll
Mhm.
post if I see someone getting attacked, I'll post it no matter who it is, right?
Mhm.
Because people need to learn from this. What happened right before? What were the indicators that violence was going to
Mhm.
happen? Who did they invite it by being unaware? All these
Mhm.
different things, and if we do that, we start solving the problems. We start addressing,
Mhm.
why are people attacking who? And
Mhm.
then if you do that, well, then now we have unity. Now we're addressing the problems, but that's when the politicians unfortunately lose their power because they only get power from tribalism.
Mm-hmm. Jeez, it just makes my blood boil when I think about it.
It really does. You watch grandmas being attacked, you watch women
Right.
being attacked, you watch toddlers being attacked, you watch all these other people. You could sit there on social media and watch it all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I recommend doing that to some extent because we have to make those tragedies matter.
Yeah.
If we can save one person's life or innocence, right? It's not all just about saving lives. I'd rather somebody not be a victim for the rest of their life,
Right.
right?
Right.
So if I can prevent that by showing somebody else doing that and having them make adjustments,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that they don't become that victim. Like as a
Mm-hmm.
cop, this was back when I was a cop, we could do proactive policing. We
Mm-hmm.
would leave the station and would go try to prevent crime and respond to the crimes that happened. Those days are gone. All my
Mm-hmm.
friends who are still cops, they tell me,
Mm-hmm.
Jay, we sit in the parking lot until a crime's been committed and they dispatch us to it. Right?
Never thought I would live in a society like that.
Never, never. And you've got giant cities, like major metropolitan cities, where they're so understaffed, they have two cops covering an entire city.
Jeez.
Right? Like that is where we're at. Right. So just imagine, like, my heart goes out to law enforcement. I've been a veteran,
Mhm.
I've been a cop, like a police officer is the hardest job today in America because
Mhm.
every decision you're going to do is going to be that you make in 100th of a second is going to be diagnosed in a courtroom and dissected in a courtroom
Mhm.
over days, hours, weeks, years. Right. When I was in there, the tie went to the cop.
Mhm.
You were there with a noble intention to help people. Whatever happened after that point, you were assumed good. Right
Mhm.
now, obviously, some people have done some horrible things, and those are very obvious. But you were
Mhm.
assumed good until proven otherwise. That's not the case anymore. The cop is wrong
Mhm.
until and the problem is cities settle now, right? They just want their voters to just keep voting them in because cities vote which way? They vote
Mhm.
one way every time. So they
Mhm.
just try to, settle every time and throw the cops under the bus.
Well, I really, and maybe I'm just, Pollyanna, but I really believe that something is changing.
I hope so.
And I think it's, not going to happen overnight, but I really do believe that there's a lot of people who are waking up and saying, "Hey, wait a minute." And a
Well,
lot
I've
of
been
them.
trying to encourage all those people who are waking up to
Mhm.
move to places where people are already woke,
Mhm.
right? Where they're already living this stuff. So that's why I moved to Tennessee, where I'm surrounded by like-minded people, right?
Mhm.
What happened, there was a deliberate attempt. Back in the day, we all had to be good neighbors because when your
Mhm.
house was on fire, before there was a fire department, your
Mhm.
neighbors showed up to throw fire or water under your house. When your daughter was kidnapped, your neighbors formed up a posse and went after
Mhm.
her, right?
Mhm.
This was a community,
Mhm.
right? This was community. You knew everyone,
Mhm.
right? And everyone knew you.
Mhm.
Well, we've replaced that with government. Now we don't even know who our neighbor is across the street and down a house, right? So we don't have to be good to one another anymore. We don't have to love thy neighbor as thyself, which is a
Mhm.
biblical principle. Why? Because neighbors solve problems together. Neighbors
Mhm.
are a community. Neighbors are independent on each other. That's why Christ's teaching on that was not love your brother, sister, mother, uncle, cousin, family.
Mhm.
Love thy neighbor as thyself. Where is there the most tension between neighbors? It's where my freedom collides with your freedom,
Mhm.
right? So again, getting around people who share the same worldview, now you have
Mhm.
everything in common. Now everything's
Mhm.
solvable. If we don't know what a woman is, where are we at as a society? If we can't agree that one, can have babies and one can't, right? Like we don't have anything to like we we are in serious trouble. Like
Mhm.
serious trouble. I was watching an interview with Eric Prince, who is the former SEAL, founder of Blackwater, who
Oh,
built up his own, like
mhm.
legitimate dude who's in the know and been advising people, has had his own private army.
Mhm.
And, he's like, how do we avoid a second civil war or anything like that? He's like, well, you need a common identity. And right now we don't have a common identity on
Mhm.
anything. Like
Mhm.
if depending on which way you vote, you see
Mhm.
things completely different this way or completely different that way.
Mhm.
It's
And
and
that has all been by design.
course, of course, of course. That's by design to separate us so that, um, so, so basically it used to be, right? All this deception. It used to be, hey, right and left were, Democrat, Republican were basically the same except for social issues,
Mhm.
right? I'll do pro-gun, you do anti-gun, you do pro-life, I'll do I'll do
Mhm.
abortion, whatever. And but we'll all have the same foreign policy,
Mhm.
right? Now that's completely different. Now, you have the old guard, which is still like that, but now you have people saying, listen, our country's falling apart. We're tired of spending money on
Mhm.
foreign wars and sending our kids to die for nothing. All my friends died for nothing. Like all my friends, all the blood, all the suffering, all the marriages, all the widows, all that was all. I don't think we made America safer in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
Right? It was all to keep perpetual micro wars in safe places where where politicians could make money. They go in
Mhm.
making 200K a year. They come out multi-millionaires.
Yeah, how does that happen?
Yeah,
Isn't that
exactly.
peculiar?
Well, they invest in companies that are about to get the toilet paper contract for every base in the world.
Mhm.
They invest in the company that's about to make the missile system that's going to go,
Yeah.
and only they can do it. You
Yeah.
can't do that. I
Yeah.
can't do
I
it.
was being sarcastic. I do
Yeah, I
that
know. I know.
sometimes.
I'm just connecting the dots for those out there who that might have been news for.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, um, I want you to talk about the definition of a warrior
Sure.
because you are a warrior,
Yep.
obviously,
100%.
and you help train other people to become warriors as
Yeah.
well. And so, what is a warrior and why does it not conflict with Christianity and biblical teachings?
Sure. My church is actually called Christian Warrior Mission, just so you know.
Yes.
And the pacifism doctrine has invaded the church and it has feminized the church to the point of unrecognizability. If you walk in churches across America, you're going to see like 60, 70% of the congregation, 80, 90% is all going to be women. It's not going to be men. Any red-blooded male walks in, they typically will see a beta male pastor in a sweater vest, no scars, no calluses, no masculinity up there that they cannot identify with. This is by design. This is by design. This was not the way it was. Pastors forever were bivocational. They went and they
Mhm.
worked the fields as farmers, as factory workers, as all these other different things. And they came and they related to their congregation because they were men, right? They were
Mhm.
real men. Now, Christ was the good shepherd, right?
Mhm.
What does a shepherd do? The shepherd nurtures his flock. The shepherd helps, help. They're there when they're born. They're there raising them, take care of them, but they also protect. Without
Mhm.
protection, the flock doesn't exist. The flock, they are there to protect from the wolf. They're there to protect from the lion. They're there to protect from the thieves who come to
Mhm.
abduct them, the kidnappers, right? So the good shepherd has a responsibility to protect, and the warrior is the protector. Okay. The warrior is the protector. Now, in biblical times, who, throughout the entire Old Testament, who executed the punishment? The population did. Stoning was the death sentence, right?
Mhm.
The population did that. Um, we have to become the protectors of our families first. As men, we'll just say, women. I do train plenty of women as well, but men, their primary goal when they were created in the Garden of Eden was to protect the garden. Now,
Mhm.
man, Adam failed and let the serpent in. Okay. Adam failed. Okay. And our job is now, like, Christ came to die on the cross. And everyone thinks that our job is to do what the job that Christ did. And that's only Christ could serve as the perfect lamb of sacrifice.
Mhm.
He was the lamb who took the sin of the world on him to redeem and defeat sin the first
Mhm.
time around. Right. His goal was not man. His goal was to destroy death and sin. Right. So if he doesn't die, we're all damned.
Mhm.
Right. So he came, he could have killed everyone with a word. Okay.
Mhm.
Jordan Peterson describes meekness, I think, the most accurate. Meekness is one of those short swords behind you sheathed. You know how to use it, and you only use it to defend, right?
Mhm.
To defend the helpless and yourself. People have turn the other cheek, right? Which when you
Mhm.
break the language down is a backhanded slap. It's an insult, right? It's not a life. Jesus didn't say, stab me once, stab me twice, cut off my right hand, cut off my left hand. You know, he didn't say that. That wasn't what the parable was about. It wasn't what he was talking about. He was talking about an insult. Well, insults don't matter,
Mhm.
right? Insults don't matter. What matters is protecting innocence, right?
Mhm.
No greater love. Okay, let's break this down. And this is where I have to get into it with a lot of people. No greater love is there than this, to lay one's life down for one's friends.
Mhm.
Well, the soldier and the first responder does that for people he doesn't know. He does
Mhm.
it for people who hate him, right? So when I got saved, and I didn't cover this in my testimony, when I got saved, truly, when I came back from RW, I started church shopping, trying to find a church where I fit in. And I felt like a great white shark swimming around with a bunch of guppies. Right, here's a bunch of people. They're putting on a great light show, a great concert, this and that. But I know men who are putting gun in their mouths every night, trying not to blow their brains out because they had to do horrible things overseas, or their daughter is now a stripper because they weren't there for their entire teenage life, you know, and
Mm.
they were deployed. Their marriages were deployed. All these horrible things, and no one was talking about that. There was no place where I felt like there was any form of masculinity in the church until I found a pastor who was that way. And I had to go to Maine to find him. Ken Graves. Now, here was a guy who had a voice like Thor. It was like mountains grinding. He wasn't a military guy. He wasn't first responder. He was a logger, but he was real. And here's what I saw. I saw a man protecting his flock. When I got there during COVID, I drove all night with my family to get there.
Mhm.
We drove all night to get there. When I got there, he was rolling boulders off a trailer with his guys because they had to take the service outside to protect from vehicle attacks. That is a shepherd, right?
Mhm.
That is a
Mhm.
shepherd. And, you know, and when I saw that, I'm like, okay, Ken showed me I could be masculine. I should be masculine. God made me, gave me this gift, testosterone, gave me this bone density, gave me aggression to be able to ramp it up to defend my family. Now you got to remember, before farms, right? Man had to go out and hunt and kill everything.
Mhm.
Predator instincts. You can't do that as a beta male, right?
Mhm.
You can't do that as some soft, squishy thing. You have to go out and take something's life to feed your family,
Mhm.
right? Now we have farms, and I love animals. I pray and I am sad for every critter I have to kill on my back property. Okay. But I give them very good lives, and I understand that's why God made them.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I pray for them to guide my shot. I do not skimp on things to try to do it cheap. I try to do it so they suffer the least. They put their head down for their favorite thing, and then the lights go out. Right.
Mhm.
That's what I do here. Some people don't, but that's what I do.
Mhm.
Men have to step into that. And if there's not men, women, and men and women, and my wife, she's my shield maiden. Do you ever see Vikings? I don't know if you ever saw
Yes,
that.
I did.
She's my
Yes.
Lagatha, right?
Yeah.
When I go down, she's the shield maiden. I'm going to cry here. Hold on. My wife is a warrior. She will stand over me when I fall. Okay. That's the type of families we need. The whole world is coming after your family. They want to turn your kids into something they're not. They want to send them all to hell. The enemy is coming for your entire family. And unless you
Mhm.
have a warrior husband and a warrior wife out there fighting together for your family, you're doomed. Right. So I teach women how to fight and shoot. I teach people how to homestead because you have to get off the food grid. You have,
Mhm.
like, the more I work with God's creation and the less I work with this and
Mhm.
this, the
Mhm.
more I work with his stuff, the closer I feel to him, the more brilliant, the more peace I have, the more I have to interact with technology and junk and the stuff of men, the less peace I have. Right.
Mhm.
So you have to fight for your family 24/7. Okay. And that means that you have to educate them. They may not have to offend somebody to save their life. Right.
Mhm.
They,
Mhm.
you know, and that's why. So to get back to my biblical, I could go off on tangents with you all day. Thank you for letting me rant.
Oh,
But
no, I'm loving this. I'm
so
loving this conversation. You're great.
God loves warriors more than anything. And let me, maybe other than children. And let me
Mhm.
explain that. Who was a man after his own heart? David. David was a warrior. Okay. Who are the two most celebrated people in the New Testament? Right? The centurion, whose faith God himself marveled at, Jesus marveled at the centurion's faith. Marveled. Okay. The creator of everything marveled at a centurion's faith. Right. And I'll explain after the next example. When God decided to save Gentiles, and like which he always decided, but when he officially started doing that and inviting them into the fold, did he choose a scholar? No. Did he choose a healer? No. Did he choose a librarian? No. Did he choose a farmer? No. Did he even choose a shepherd? No. He chose a blood-soaked centurion named Cornelius as the first Gentiles saved. Okay. That means something. Okay. That means something. Why? Because the warrior understands the greatest love. The warrior understands service. Christianity is all about service. The warrior serves every day knowing that he's about to give up everything for someone else. Maybe a stranger, maybe somebody who hates him. No one else gets that relationship. No one gets that service other than the warrior. And that's why God loves warriors the way he does. Right. And that's why we must be warriors, because you cannot be willing to do that highest love without being a warrior. And just laying down and letting them kill you first so they can go kill your family next. That's not it. That's not it at all. That's a sacrifice. You did it with the right motivation. But if you don't fight them, fighting is pain. Fighting is suffering. Fighting is all that, right? So, and it's scary as heck unless you're crazy, right? It's scary as heck. So again, that is why being a warrior is, I believe, mandatory for at least men and women, in my opinion, because again, my wife is that and then some.
I just love your wife.
She's awesome. She's awesome. And she came from zero background. We actually, you should watch her videos sometime. We have videos up there. My story, the founders of Trident Shield, my wife and her, and she grew up an everyday American, never was in a fight, never any of that. Now she's a gun packing, hard hitting, power transferring female.
Wow.
Or
Okay,
shield maiden, as I call it.
So when you're talking about that, where are some of those videos at that we could see them? And why don't you tell us where we can find you? Of course, all the links will be in the show notes, but I really like for the guests to be able to articulate because it makes it a lot more personal.
If you want to interact with me personally, my Twitter feed is the best place. And that's Pastor Seal Cop on Twitter. That's where you can chat with me. You can talk to me. I answer everything. I'm not that big. Like, I'm not some guy with millions of followers. So people come to me for there all the time. I do a show Monday through Thursday called Christian Warrior Talk. Okay. Christian Warrior Talk is from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. And we fight 3 battles there every day. 1, we fight to get a humble and grateful heart aligned onto the Lord, which means we check our pity party at the door, right? We check our pity party and feeling sorry for ourselves, because we all have reasons to feel sorry for ourselves, but there is countless reasons why we shouldn't be sorry. We should be grateful. Okay. And that aligns us to God. 2, we deliberately pursue a relationship with Jesus Christ by studying 1 chapter of the Bible at a time, right? And through prayer. 3rd, we spend that time in fellowship with iron sharpening iron. That's where I go over prepping, self-defense, warrior training, talk, all that stuff, as well as, hey, my marriage is struggling. Well, fight for it, man. Fight for everything's a fight. Fight for it, man. Right. Or woman, I'm 50-50 in my viewership. When I did my first forging is a 3-day event I do here. It's where everyone comes for Friday night through Sunday night. And I did it thinking all men would show up. I had 50% women show up. I'm like, what am I going to do with these chicks? I have no idea. But guess what? They all needed the same thing. A lot of them didn't have men in their life. A lot of them were the disciplers. They were single moms, and they had to teach their family until, they got a husband that could come in and come alongside them. Right. So again, it's just anytime watching the light bulb go off, anytime a warrior is a part of the solution, everyone else is just riding.
Excellent point. So I just wanted to let you know that you do have. Sorry. Okay. Well, you do have 1 more follower on Twitter, because I just started following you this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as far as the Christian Warrior Talk, so that's 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. to 10 p.m.
9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard. And that's where we do discipleship training, warrior discipleship training.
So are those recorded?
I do everything live.
Okay. So
People, I take phone calls live, but they live there forever, right? Or
okay.
until Facebook or YouTube takes them down because I showed a firearm on camera or whatever, But Twitter has left me alone, so I recommend you watch all my content on Twitter. It's not as polished of an experience. Twitter's still working out their video content live, but that's where I put everyone's chat on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
so you can
Mm-hmm.
interact with the audience no matter whether they're on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, or um, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. I put everybody up there. Okay.
Okay.
But like I most of my followers are watching on Twitter now.
Mm-hmm.
The other place, if you want to find the security training, the emergency preparedness is Trident Shield. That is tridentshield.net. And I just finally, after 14 years, bought .com. somebody in Malaysia had it for 14 years and it just came up and I just got it. So, but tridentshield.net for now. Eventually it'll be tridentshield.com. That's where I do my active shooter training, my women's self-defense stuff, and all that other corporate and forward-facing stuff. And then Christian Warrior Mission is my church. I do Sunday at 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that you can find me on all social media platforms under Christian Warrior Mission, which is more my more robust presence.
Uh-huh.
And Twitter is where you get me raw.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the fact that you said, not as polished, but I think that's
Yeah.
one of the few blessings that did come out of COVID is that we
Yeah.
realized, oh, hey, we don't have to be perfect all the time.
No, I'd rather be real 100%,
I was just going to say that.
you know,
Just get
um,
real.
So like this here isn't a green screen. That's just like yours, I'm sure. This is my background. That is,
Yeah.
that's my pulpit, and I
Mm-hmm.
turn it that way when I'm doing services. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this is my girl cave.
there you
So,
go.
and this
And
is,
look at you. You're published twice over at least, right?
I am. Yeah. I've published 2 books and working on at least 2 more. The one I'm working on right now is just, I'd like to say, a big steaming pile of excrement, but I refuse to give up because I really think it's going to be an important book. It's a follow up to the Ninja book, which is actually like a memoir, how I got into martial arts and the whole crazy ride. It's really pretty crazy. Yeah, and the first one is just fitness over 50, and that was my just sticking my toe into the world of publishing. And yeah, it's like writing books are like eating potato chips. You can't stop at just one. You have to keep on
Yeah.
going.
Well, I haven't started that, but I'm actually writing a chapter for a collaborative book on what we just talked about.
Well, I kind of figured, and I was going to ask you if you were going to write a book, but I would imagine you're pretty busy right now.
I'm so slammed. I
Yeah.
really am slammed, and it's I'm waiting for God to clear out space for me to do that part of it, right? So writing one chapter, 3,000 words isn't a problem, but like writing something more than that, I don't even know the process. So you know the process,
Oh,
but
I do. Yeah. And
so
it is quite a ride and quite a process.
well, I've enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoy you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me on here. I hope I provided some sort of value for someone somewhere.
Oh, I absolutely loved having you on the show. I love the conversation and all of the tips and, learning the spirit of a warrior from your perspective has just really been amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. What an amazing episode. I have just, like I said, loved this conversation. There's so many wonderful little nuggets in here, golden nuggets, pearls of wisdom, a lot of information. All that I want to say to wrap up is, explore some of these ideas and these thoughts that Jason has shared with us. And please, 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 I am begging you on bended knee, put your cell phones down. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.